Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the news briefing for this Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. We'll get started with our first topic, which is COVID-19 information. We're happy to have Dr. Moreno with us again, as usual. Good afternoon, Dr. Moreno.
Hi, Matt. Good afternoon.
And happy day before Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
So if there, unless Dr. Marni, you have anything you want to start off the top with, if anyone has questions for Dr. Moreno, go ahead and put them in the chat.
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions, Matt.
So we'll need to give folks a couple seconds to put their questions into chat. In the meantime, can you talk about perhaps some best practices for people as we head into Thanksgiving that people should be aware of as they gather and get together with people, oftentimes indoors? I know we often, say the same thing many times, but it's really good to remind people what's the best way to gather with COVID-19 and flu and RSV still circulating.
Sure, Matt. So we have holidays throughout the year, and the most important thing to remember is that regardless of what time of the year we're in or what holidays around, the best way to protect yourself against COVID-19 is to get vaccinated. Currently we have the bivalent vaccine that's available and available to individuals who, even if they've received the initial series and previous boosters. So anyone who's eligible to get the bivalent vaccine should receive it as soon as they're eligible. And that was the best way to prevent serious illness and hospitalization due to COVID-19. And whenever people are gathering for whatever reason, it's important to stay home if you're sick. Don't go to gatherings if you're feeling ill. Cover your cough with your elbow, preferably, not your hands. Wash your hands frequently. And it's still wearing a mask in indoor crowded settings is effective in reducing transmission of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Moreno. I have a question for you. This reporter is asking about RSV in our area. We saw that some Bay Area hospitals are using tents to handle patients who have RSV. Of course, there is our area may be different, but what is the trend of RSV and flu in Monterey County? And do you think it is going to be worse due to the holidays?
So as far as RSV, I don't have any trends. RSV is not a reportable disease. And so we don't have rates of RSV, for example, here in Monterey County. And the same goes for influenza. We don't have rates of influenza to report on. But I will just say that RSV, flu, and several other viruses that cause respiratory illness can look like COVID. And so my recommendation is that if there's a vaccine that protects a person against a respiratory illness, which currently includes influenza and COVID-19, the individual should get vaccinated against those illnesses as soon as they're eligible. Still, it's the best way to protect yourself and to protect the hospitals from becoming overwhelmed with people with illnesses that can be prevented.
I think a lot of people are surprised that people actually get hospitalized because of influenza. I think sometimes people say I have the flu and they may kind of confuse the flu with a cold, but influenza is not just a cold, it is a serious illness.
So influenza, again, can mimic COVID. You can, those viruses can cause serious illness. They can lead to hospitalizations and occasionally death. Again, the vaccine is really the best way to protect yourself against COVID-19. And since we have vaccinations against flu, getting vaccinated against flu would be the best way to protect yourself and others from getting viral respiratory illnesses like influenza and COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Moreno. Any other questions for Dr. Moreno today before we let him go? Seeing none, thank you very much for answering questions today. Have a happy Thanksgiving holiday, Dr. Moreno.
You too.
Well, we were talking a little bit about gathering with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. And when we talk Thanksgiving gathering, we talk food. And that is why we have Marni Flagg with us today from the Health Department Environmental Health Bureau, because she's going to talk safety, she's going to talk turkey. And Marni, it sounds like we should act a little bit like health inspectors when we are preparing our Thanksgiving meal, and not just the meal, but appetizers or any other food. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news or be a bummer, but yes, everyone needs to get their food safety hats on right now when we're talking turkey. So I'm going to share some slides with you and give some tips, and we'll go from there. All right. All right, it's turkey time. So let's review all of the food safety tips that you need for a holiday meal. No one wants to be remembered for that bummer where everyone got sick at their house. So the first thing that I want to point out to everyone is that it's super important to wash your hands and clean your surfaces very often. You want to wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap and warm water before, during, and after preparing your food and before you eat. And, you know, I really want to highlight that you want to wash your hands after handling uncooked meat, chicken, and other poultry, flour, or eggs. My daughter always reminds me that flour is a raw food, so that's something to be aware of during Thanksgiving. Wash your utensils, your cutting boards, and your countertops with hot soapy water after preparing each food item as well. And you want to clean your surfaces using soap and water, and then appropriate EPA registered household disinfectant. And we all know where we can find those, but we want to make sure that all of our surfaces are disinfected. And by regularly cleaning those surfaces in your home, you prevent the spread of germs, not only the food germs that we're talking about, norovirus, Shigella, salmonella, but also the germs that you were just talking about with Dr. Moreno, influenza, COVID-19, and some of those other pesky little colds and flus that are going around right now. So just as a reminder, cleaning removes most germs, sanitizing reduces germs, and disinfecting kills germs. So you want to reach for those disinfectants around your house during this time and keep everyone nice and healthy. So while you're cooking, you want to remember to keep your foods separate. Don't cross-contaminate. And I think this is the #1 thing that we see making people sick on Thanksgiving. So when you're doing that grocery shopping, keep your raw meat and your poultry away from other foods. And when you're in your kitchen, keep those turkeys and eggs away from all the other foods in your refrigerator. Remember that the raw meat should be on the bottom, and all of your fresh fruits and vegetables should be on top, because you don't want anything to drip down onto produce or anything that you're going to eat before you cook it. So use 1 cutting board for meat, 1 cutting board for produce and bread, and don't wash your raw meat and poultry. That can definitely spread germs all over your kitchen. You want to rinse your fruits and vegetables under running water, but no need to splash that salmonella all around the sink. And you want to cook your food to the right temperature. It's safely cooked when the internal temperature gets high enough to kill those germs that can make you sick. And in this picture, you can see a nice thermometer that will remind you of all those handy temperatures that you need to get to. And you want to cook your turkey to 165. Make sure that it's all cooked. You can't tell by looking at it. You definitely need a thermometer for that. And finally, chill your food. Make sure your refrigerator is at 40 below. And if your refrigerator doesn't have a built-in thermometer, you want to put one in there. And if you're going to package up your leftovers, you want to put them like this picture in shallow dishes so that they do cool effectively in the refrigerator. And it's okay to put smaller portions in your refrigerator because they'll cool fast enough. And you want to make sure that you put them in there within 2 hours. And just a reminder, when you're thawing your turkey, always thaw in the refrigerator in cold water, or you can carefully microwave for defrosting. You never want to leave thawing food on the counter because that's how bacteria multiply quickly at room temperature. So there's the 4 reminders that are the most important, and that's how everyone can have a safe holiday meal. If anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Well, I do want to ask one thing before I jump in, before anybody else may ask. There's the meal, but what about the pre-meal? Because a lot of people get together and they put out dips and appetizers and everything, early on, and then the meal comes later. What's the best rule of thumb for appetizers?
So the rule of thumb is keep hot food hot and cold food cold. So if you're going to put a hot appetizer out, you want to make sure it's heated up to 165, and then you can leave it out there for those 2 hours. And then you either want to reheat it back up to that 165, or you're going to chill it back down to 40 and store it in the refrigerator. And
so the 2-hour rule applies for any foods?
Yes. Yes, hot food hot, cold food cold, and then you don't really want to leave food sitting out on the counter. Unless it's a stable food at room temperature.
Okay. I was going to say, when we talk about crackers or chips or things like that, those are stable. But when you're talking about dairy, anything with dairy, or
right, so that's a cold food cold, hot food hot.
Okay. So if you're in charge of the food, don't take any guff. If you're wanting to chill, take the appetizers off the table and maybe rotate them. Have some in the refrigerator that you could rotate, depending on the guests that you have. Just, like you said, don't be the one who has the reputation or the history of we got sick at somebody's party, right?
Yeah, and I've often, made 2 different containers for appetizers, 2 smaller containers, and set them out and kept one in the warmer. And then when the first one's empty, pull the second one out. So there's no need to, put a big, huge one out when you can just separate them into 2 smaller ones and keep one warm.
And then a question about washing the turkey. I think people think it's not intuitive to not wash the turkey. And are you surprised by people who do that and maybe, are having a hard time understanding why it's not safe to wash the bird?
Well, and things have changed over time. A lot of our food is more processed now, and the turkeys are packaged and differently than they were before, when you really did need to wash them before, maybe. But now the way everything is packaged and prepared, it's not recommended anymore to wash the large birds in the sink in the kitchen.
And would that same rule of thumb apply for raw chicken or other poultry that you may buy beyond Thanksgiving?
Yes, for sure.
Thanks very much, Marni, for joining us and sharing information that we know people are watching going, oh, better make double appetizers. And we want everyone to have a very safe Thanksgiving, gather and have fun and not feel sick.
I agree, and I hope everyone has a wonderful meal.
Thank you. Thanks, Marni. And thanks, everyone, for joining us on the news briefing this week. Our next briefing is next week. We'll see you then, and have a happy Thanksgiving.